All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Laurie Wonder with YourLifeCore. Welcome to April 5th, our episode of YourLifeCore Talk Radio. And with me tonight again, I have my co-host, Mark Giffon from Sedona, Arizona with Sedona Mystical Tours. Welcome, Mark. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you, Laurie. It's nice to get back into the flow of this and letting all of our listeners know, as well as you and I, we survived March. We're still breathing.
Oh my gosh, the March March energies were just insane. My calendar was incredibly full in March, and it is incredibly full in April as people are still kind of spiraling from what the heck just happened.
Yeah, so like being punch drunk.
It was, and I called it almost a psychic or a psychic obstacle course. I mean, it was just crazy because we kept running into roadblocks and having to spin around and go back and start over again. But yep, March is behind us. But you know what? April's going to be kind of tense also.
In a different way.
Yeah. We've got a number of retrogrades that I hope that we can talk about that as we dive into the show. But I want to let our listeners know tonight is not about how tough March was, but tonight our topic is about balance of the masculine and feminine energies. And I wanted to talk about this because we just went through this whirlwind of energy that impacted a lot in our relationships with people, not just romantic relationships, but children and family and work relationships. Just all of those took a hit. But I also want to touch on just how both sexes are impacted through these shifts in energies. And as we elevate into higher consciousness, what is each sex, or what is each energy, because we all have both energies, both male and female, so what are we experiencing? So that's really our topic tonight is balance of the feminine and masculine energy. So with that, I want to invite in, because oftentimes along with relationships, we talk about romance and intimacy, and then just the overall relationships, and there's overseers to that. And so, Mark, I'd like to, just draw attention, and if you have any that you work with in that area, I'd just like to call them in and acknowledge. At the archangel level, there's Archangel Shamuel and Archangel Ariel and Archangel Raziel. And for relationships specific, or finding those relationships, I always suggest to people that they invoke Archangel Shamuel, Hathor, or Anagus. And Anagus is a Celtic god, and he's quite powerful. He shows up quite often in my office as I'm working here with clients and such. And then Aphrodite, and we can laugh because Aphrodite showed up at our last show as we were talking about purpose, kind of the love goddess, around romance and passion and kindling or rekindling, and then keeping the romance and that passion burning in relationships. But also Guinevere and Islat and Pele. And Ishtar is also very prevalent. Some of the other angels, though, I wanted to talk about, or some of the other ascended masters I wanted to bring up, were just those that help us manifest, and manifesting in relationships, because it's one thing to just be in a relationship or dream about a relationship, but it's actually putting things into practice to manifest that. And again, that's Archangel Ariel, Raziel, Damara, Jesus steps in, Melchizedek, Saint Germain, and Solomon all step in that space. So for those listeners out there, I kind of ran through those fast. This is a great list to have if you're looking to manifest or open up a relationship or shift the relationship that you're in. These are all the keepers and the overseers that assist us in that part of our life, in that domain of our life. So, all right.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you how you feel, the senses you feel when they show up.
Oh, that's a great question. And my clients often ask me, what do I see, or what do I feel, or how do I know? And they show up differently. Usually, for example, Archangel Michael, he comes in and he comes in with the flame. He carries fire, and there's heat with him. The romance angels or the love angels, I really feel an opening in the heart area, almost to the point that it makes me teary-eyed sometimes, or it's an overflowing. It's almost like if you could think of your heart being a volcano, a nice volcano of energy flowing. It's this overflowing of energy that comes through. And sometimes there's multiple that come in. So for example, the last episode when Aphrodite showed up in my office, I literally had to stop and ask her. I know you and I were just talking, our listeners probably didn't even know I was having this a conversation with her in my mind about who are you, and then this knowing of who was present. And so sometimes it's a knowing, sometimes it's a feeling, sometimes it's a visual of them, but mostly for these, it's in my heart area.
So for anyone listening, the quality, the characteristic that they're calling on, they don't necessarily need to know the name of the angel. They just ask the angels, archangels of that quality, and that will still happen.
Right. And I have a lot of clients and a lot of people, they want to know the archangels. A lot of clients are students of mine also that are studying the Ascended Masters or the archangels, and so they have a desire to learn their names and to learn the differences in what they do. But you're absolutely right, Mark. I also tell people, coach people, if you don't know, just ask the relationship angels to come in, or the angels of the heart. And be specific. The reason I say be specific on relationship, because if I just call in angels to help me in the heart area, Raphael might show up, and other angels that might be related to maybe health-related items might show up, versus relationship kind of is a broad topic, and it covers a lot of areas in our life. Like I said, not just romantic relationships, but relationships with family members and work, and just our community that we're in.
Yeah, and one of the things, we're talking about relationships, and all of us simply slide into that one-on-one partnership thing, the significant other type of relationship, and that's just one of many, right?
It is one of many. It is one of many, and all of the relationships are shifting for us, and so that's why so many people might see friendships shift away. They might see work environments, like where they just leave a work environment, or their coworkers leave, or they just need to leave. I just was reading an article about a flight that just recently landed in Texas, and when it pulled up to the gate, the pilots were getting the bridge ready for the passengers to leave, and one of the flight attendants went to the opposite side of the plane, opened the door, and dispelled the chute, and then slid down the chute, and then just walked away. And I was talking to my daughter about it, and we both said, wow, she must have had a really bad day to just go to that point of just being done. And it was funny because both our minds went there, because that's the energy that we're in right now, as people are kind of getting to that point of boiling and fed up and not knowing how to handle a situation. Now, I don't know if she, if she was quitting and that was her last day, but it was kind of interesting that both of us, my daughter and I both, we both went to thinking that about that kind of that boiling point. So, but it is all relationships. And right now, I want to remind our listeners that this is a year about transformation and moving into higher consciousness, which includes action and that I am energy that we've been talking about, and then working with our community. And so we have relationships with those in our community, but we have the biggest relationship with ourselves, and that's that I am energy. And all of it is being pushed and spun around and turned so that we can work through it just to be better, or to move us along on our journey path.
Yeah,
so.
The self-awareness is really what you're mentioning, the phrase, be still and know that you're God. The other phrase, know thyself. And, when I'm thinking about this topic for the last few days, one of the things that always sticks to my mind is I've seen documentaries and even this research at Harvard, 80 years of study about what brings the most happiness to humanity, and it's a sense of belonging. And when it comes to this topic, this probably just like the word love, maybe the most misunderstood word in our language, this relationship and love. And if you change that to belonging, a sense of belonging, being even needed and being accepted, then it starts to extend itself just past this intimate, significant other, and it could go into, like you mentioned, these areas of our life where we're relating at work, with family members, with neighbors, just with friends at the gym, friends at the social gatherings, and sometimes those types of relationships, our soul wants us to develop more than this Aphrodite, romantic, Cupid type of connection, because that's, in a way, and it may sound a little harsh, but sometimes that's the last thing that we need to go through. The other things are more of a priority, because those intimate, significant other relationships, if we haven't done enough so-called work on ourselves, they're simply codependency.
You're absolutely right. And one of the other pieces, or one of the other terms that I'm calling this year, is it's kind of a year of mass confusion, and it is a year to go through inner work to get ourselves back on track. And I agree with that 100%, is that knowing that internal being, shedding away the things that simply don't work for yourself before you get into a codependency or deep relationship. Now, I want to make sure our listeners hear that I'm not saying that you have to do this solo, because you certainly can be in a relationship, and you can be married, or you can be dating someone, and you can be in a relationship and still maintain that relationship. But the importance that I think Mark and I are drawing attention to is that you have to acknowledge that the work starts with yourself. And so before a couple can evolve and grow to that next step, the inner works of both individuals need to really take place.
And that's, that true meaning of I guess the divine meaning of relationship. So that takes the intimacy out of it, because you can have this type of connection with really anyone.
Absolutely. It's creating that space. It's creating that space for love, no matter what form, because love comes in many different shapes and forms, and there's even different feelings that come with love. And the importance is just creating that space, and then trusting enough in your own dictionary or your own definition of how you approach that relationship. And it's always from a place of love, a different sort of love, but it's always from a different a place of love.
Yeah, different frequency of love.
Right, because love does have a frequency, and there's variations of that frequency. So, Mark, can you share your thoughts on just the masculine and feminine energy that we all have?
Yeah, I like to view it as, first and foremost, energy. We're kind of walking patterns, forms of energy, genetic code energy, and we carry masculine and feminine traits within ourselves. From an astrological perspective, you could be a male with lots of feminine influences in your chart, and that's actually a good balance, just like a female can have a lot of masculine influences. So we go past just a specific gender and say, the kind of like laws of physics, the masculine energy is radiating. It goes outward, and in a sense it's more expressive, like the sign Leo, for example, very masculine. And then the feminine energy, it pulls in, it nurtures. And it would be like the water signs like Pisces and Cancer, very empathic, very sensitive to your surroundings, influenced heavily by the environment. And then that leads us to the biological difference, the it's already been talked about and proven with men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and other things. Our brains are different. The female brain is wired differently than the male brain because the female brings in children. They have to watch over children, so they have a neural net of multitasking, observing every little thing that occurs in the environment. And men are kind of like adventurous. We're pioneers. We kind of go out to hunt, gather, and go to war. So we have more of a goal-oriented, straight line approach to life, and that really creates a lot of problems with when you get to the intimate relationships, because we're looking at the other from our perspective. Men are looking at women from male perspective, and women are looking at men from female perspective.
Yep.
So you just realize there's a certain energetic dynamic that the genders have, and of course, like I said, that the planetary chemistry creates these influences in the person too, regardless of gender.
Well, and females, as you touched on it, the feminine intuition, that's a natural characteristic of the feminine. And so in 2016, where we're moving more into, I would say it's a more intuitive year, or it's more feminine energy based. How is that impacting? Let's talk about both the women. I can answer for women, but how are you seeing that impact the men in 2016 when you've got there's more of a fluid, or more of a flow, more of a push to move into higher consciousness and to use some of that intuition that maybe is just a little bit more natural to the female gender?
I think it's the women have always relied on it, and the men have suppressed that within themselves. But when men, we call it gut instinct. We don't necessarily, men typically may not label it as intuition because, well, for a variety of reasons. But they have, let's call it, they feel it's a sense of knowing. And then I would say the problem men are having with this intuitive energy, the feminine energy coming in, was their sense of knowing is related to the intellect, the mental body. And we already know that men are just fixated on thinking that they know the answer to everything. Their ego does not want them to admit that they don't know anything. I mean, they don't understand something, so they tend to have the skeptical view of a lot of these phenomena, so to speak, even though they're the scientists in physics who are proving all these things. It's kind of a paradox.
Well, and I think most men are taught to be strong and taught to don't show fear, don't show doubt, fake it until you make it. And so I personally think that the guys are having maybe a harder time in 2016 because this energy is making them feel maybe wishy-washy, or the sensory, the data that's coming to them is a different type of data, and they haven't quite figured out yet where this data is coming from. When I talk about data, it's energy. It's not the hard fact intellect. It's a soft, fuzzy energy that's coming from the universe that's giving them information. They just aren't quite tuned into it as strongly yet. They're tuned in, but just not as strong yet.
Yeah, that sense of the need for the mind, the human mind, to know or to understand things. It's that part is stronger in men.
Yeah.
And the women who are controlling, for example, are having just even more of a hard time. So it's also that factor too, is the need to always have a control over something. Is those people are being extremely challenged.
That brings up a good point, because I know a number of years ago my catchphrase was "let it go," just let it go, just learn to relax into the energy, and that is one of the hardest traits for both men and women to learn. But I would agree that women that are in a more masculine role or are more controlling, that's what they're having to learn now in order to tap into their intuition. And it bugs them when they say, people always say that I'm a woman, so I should be more intuitive, and I'm not. It's that letting go. It's that, I think it's that masking that they do that prevents them from moving into that higher state of being.
And the just admitting you don't know something. That's harder for men to do than women.
Right. Well, I have to say I know some women that have a hard time admitting that also they don't ask for help. I think it's in both sexes, but I would agree it's probably more prevalent in men. I just don't want to let all the women off the hook here
No, I totally
because I know that there's some out there too.
yeah.
So you had mentioned that, you can see it in our charts. You can see it astrologically, the characteristics between the signs. And I just forever have found that just fascinating because it is so important that we do carry both masculine and feminine. So let's say someone's born and they have a chart that they have like too much. Is it possible to have too much of the masculine signs or too
Yeah.
much of the feminine signs?
Well,
And
yeah,
then,
there is. Astrologically, we will see that. And it's just a life lesson, essentially, that you really want to understand that energy. But it creates an imbalance when it's geared too much one way or the other. I think a good celebrity we could pick on is Tim Tebow. He was just a volcano of energy. He was the quarterback at Florida and then the Denver Broncos, and he had like international fame when he was playing because of his characteristics and devotion. He was just loaded with fire, masculine energy, and it was displayed, his behavior, his actions, very charismatic, enigmatic. You were just drawn to that type of a person, and someone who would have too much water would be one of those individuals we all know who are so sensitive they can't go into crowds, they can't go to stores because they feel everything. They could feel a cockroach crawling in their neighbor's house. So those are examples of kind of extreme cases, and that would kind of fall under the label of too much of something. But once again, they chose that.
They chose that, and part of their life purpose or part of what they get to work through is just how to balance that with how they came into this lifetime. So it's learning the tools and the skills to work through that. So
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about where this energy, and you touched on it when you asked me earlier where I feel when the angels and ascended masters and guides come in, but I also want to talk a little bit about where we're feeling this energy and where it's impacting our bodies, both from a masculine and feminine. And I know in the March energy, I mean, people were saying they were feeling just extreme pain in their heart chakra.
And you know why, though?
Well, it was the opening up. It was just that clearing and opening up and pushing us or pushing those that were slow to move. And you and I talked about it was old stuff coming up. I mean, the dreams were kind of crazy and
yeah, they're very vivid. When we were having heart issues coming up, the reason for that in March was because all the sadness, suffering, and pain were being pushed to the surface. And those energies are held in the heart.
Right.
And so they were being pushed to the surface. You're feeling them more because the body's given a chance to, or our bodies are saying, okay, it's time to release it. That's why the body's, presenting that issue to each of us individually. It's always been in the body, but when these energies work around with their various characteristics at certain times of our life, like March was, then it's time collectively, the pain body of humanities is saying, okay, now all of you have to address what you've been holding on to because we're tired of it. The pain bodies of humanity is tired of holding on to this, and therefore we have to consciously choose to release it. And that means recognizing it, why it's there, then forgiving the conditions that created it, and allowing it to be released back to its source.
Right. I had a number of clients that experienced immense pain, and they were tying it to a current or a more recent situation. And actually, when we peeled back the layers, it was something from a long time ago or even a past lifetime. And what's happening in our body, it's the universe and our physical bodies it's our way to address it, and it's easier when we can tie pain to something that we know. So, for example, if you have extreme pain in your heart and you think about a pet maybe you just lost, and you tie that pain to that pet that just crossed over, and it might create some confusion for you because it's like, well, my gosh, this, I'm over the pet. I know I mourned and I'm over the pet. Why is this coming up again? Actually, that's just a triggering, and it's tied to an emotion that you know about, but it might be an old relationship, or it might be something that happened in a past lifetime. But that's simply the body's way to release it, and you to identify it, because our brains always want to tie it to something.
Yeah.
Our brains always want to know, what was that? So it might not even be tied to what you think it's tied to. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It goes beyond making sense, because my personal experiences, I've had just a lot of heart-wrenching experiences, and since I had cancer surgery, and because of the work I do and the journeys I do and the deep reflections I allow myself to go into, the divine was showing me it was just an opening, a gateway opening to deeper issues, like you say, going into the past. And, this is kind of linked into relationships, because I was thinking also today, and it came to me, most of our traumas are related to relationships of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Because it's the heart.
Yeah.
We open our heart up, and then, relationships, we allow those relationships into that space.
And think about the core. In this lifetime, let's just live into this lifetime, most of the core issues and reasons why we have these matters coming up in our heart or go back to our childhood, our relationship with our parents, for example. And then it even goes back prenatally with the emotional imprint that we're feeling from the parents, the mother especially. So this causes us to almost be wandering. If we don't have any tools or facilitators, if we don't have any direction, we're constantly lost and wandering in this feeling of anguish, and it could play itself out as suffering, and then there's self-pity. A lot of negative, restrictive emotions occur because the mind is trying to label it, like you said, and so self-pity comes in because the mind is just saying, well, I can't understand the core reason for it, so obviously we should feel sorry to ourselves about this feeling.
Right, or we panic and we forget our tools.
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding that I'm reminding people to remember that you have all the tools that you need to work through this, but we get in a panic state or fear, and fear masks us or covers us, so we're not able to move through that. I know you and we wanted to talk a little bit more about the chakras and intimacy. So, when a relationship moves into a state of being intimate, and what happens with our chakras in that space. So I think now would be a good time to talk about that a little bit, because, really we're moving through, when we talk about the root chakra or the sacral chakra or solar plexus, the lower ones, those are needing to be grounded and be in balance so that they can support the heart and the upper chakras, right?
Yeah, that humanity as a whole, the vast majority only really exists in those lower three chakras. They haven't been able to rise up into the heart. And,
right.
And so let's say the karmic patterns that are stored in us are stimulated with vibration. And so when we are going into intimacy with someone, that is bringing in a strong energy, a strong vibratory energy, and that's stimulating those lower chakras, especially the chakras of survival and fear. And that's kind of why I think all of our listeners will admit within themselves, relationships change when you start having intimacy.
Right, and you're talking about survival and fear. That's our root chakra. That function of the root chakra is survival. It's our primal energy. It's about taking care of self. It's about being grounded. And that's where our stability, our passion, vitality, prosperity, health, everything stems from that space. And I agree, when you move into an intimate relationship, I say it creates a different portal for that energy to move through. And that shakes some people off their core. I mean, it shakes them up. It's a new place that they haven't been. So not even knowing that it's in that vibration, that energy, and that they've just activated a sacred intimacy portal via the root chakra.
Yeah, they open up a portal, and that portal exists in many dimensions, and a variety of influences and emotions come with it, and it's almost like gambling, quite honestly. When you get to that stage of intimacy, it's like putting all your money on the table, because you just don't know what's going to happen.
You don't, and it's an exchange of energy that takes you into a new dimension. But I also believe that there are some intimate relationships that the purpose of the intimate relationship is to spawn or to move forward, either as a couple or to move one of the couple forward. So it's gonna push you. No doubt, it's gonna push you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but there's many instances where I've talked to many people, and sometimes it's only meant to be a short-lived experience for that reason.
To create that portal to move. Now we're not saying to go out and go crazy, but there's ramifications when you have a sacred intimacy, because it does move things energetically in the force field of your energy body, as well as then it starts moving into those chakras that maybe have been shut down for a while.
That's also, that's definitely the case, I think, with a lot of people who've had rough relationships and just kind of sit on the sidelines for a number of years.
So it's also it's also important to be aware of when you embark on a sacred intimate relationship with someone, the energy that you're taking on, because you are exchanging energy with that person, and that energy then becomes embedded with your energy, and that also can have an impact on both of you negatively. If you are in an intimate relationship with someone that's really struggling in their life, and maybe hasn't done all the heart work in that space, I'm not saying you always take that on, but you run the opportunity or the chance of taking on that energy into your space. And so you might walk away like, well, what's going on with me? Suddenly I'm all out of whack in my space.
Yeah, I've experienced that in one instance where I started developing all kinds of physical problems, not STD or anything like that, but just aching all the way down to the point where I had plantar fasciitis, which is a meridian in a foot that leads up through the kidney and into the heart. And so the individual had serious heart issues concerning self and what she had done with her life. And I realized I empathically just absorbed it. And you're absolutely right. The vibration of the partner, if it's too low, it will almost be toxic for you. And many people, we've experienced this, I'm sure. You just have to look at your life and realize, well, this one person I really liked, but when we became intimate, I just started feeling terrible.
Right. And one thing that I do want to share with our listeners is that when we move into a high sensitive place of energy, the same or similar would be, I tell people that I'm pretty fussy about who I see for a massage, just simply because that also is an exchange of energy. That person that is working on me, I want them to have clear energy, that they're not dumping, because I can be very empathic. They're not dumping energy on me. And with our relationships, now I'm going to step away from intimate relationships, but even friendships and coworkers, we want to be aware that they also can dump energy in your space, and we're just more susceptible to that. Now, move into an intimate relationship, and that gets times 10 or 100 because it is a physical connection as well as an energetic connection.
Yeah, and that's why it's like nitroglycerin. It can be extremely explosive, and we see that all the time where couples of any sort, doesn't matter what the gender is, as that intimacy continues, they become let's just say they project more onto each other, that it becomes more of an inflamed relationship versus just a friendly relationship. But I want to also kind of mention just our interactions with people in general. We do know that there are people we don't want to even be in the same room with because they drain us. And then there's people that you not only want to be in the same room with, you want to sit next to them because they radiate out such a positive vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would agree.
So think about the intimacy. If you're intimate with someone who has that positive vibe, then it's going to feed you. And if you're intimate with someone who's draining, then the end result will, you probably even get sick. And this is something that you probably weren't even thinking about, talking about, because I've dealt with so many women on my tours. So many women have had breast cancer, uterine cancer. Guess why they get that cancer? It's because they're absorbing the stress of their husbands through that intimacy over all those years. And that's the nature of women. They're empathic. They're healers. And so in some ways, women have to be consciously aware that they have, they already know that there's many more negative side effects to them having sex than it is for men. And they just have to be more selective with the vibration. And even the state of mind that you enter sex with. You've told me that before. You could call on the angels to make it a clean energy exchange instead of just a raw physical act.
Right. It needs to be heart connected. And I want to go back to the women that you mentioned about the cancers and breast cancer and uterine cancer and a lot of hysterectomies. I see women that have medical issues, and not only are they taking on their spouse's energy, but they're also not clearing, or their own chakra system or their own energy system is not flowing or not moving the energy, and it's that's where it gets blocked also. So both genders are sexual beings. The women and men are sexual beings, and we're meant to be in healthy sexual relationships and have intimacy in a healthy way.
Yes, yeah, it's really meant to be heart-centered, and that's what I've really examined within myself, and where I'm at in my life, because I've had guidance say it's all right to have these intimate encounters, but if it's not. If both of you aren't going into the heart, it could be damaging to me from an energetic point of view, and it just causes it's good cause for everybody listening to really think about what you're doing with yourself. If there's not a sense of a heart connection, you really have to ask yourself: are you just doing this recreationally? And if you are, then make sure you energetically clear yourself.
Well, not just recreational. Let's talk about relationships that maybe it's maybe a feeling out of obligation.
Yeah, well, you're right. I just
and so I think there's multiple cases, and that one comes to mind too. Is I see a lot of couples even, or individuals that they say their marriage is dead, or the intimacy is dead, and how do they get that intimacy back? And because they feel that it's just out of obligation, it's not out of desire or love, and so really it's starting back at that place of the heart. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, getting back to a relationship, or getting back to what are some of the things that guys and women look for. And these are just some tips that I typically give out when I'm working with people. You can disagree or agree with them, but I've often felt that the guys really, if I could break it down to 4 things that each sexes want, the guys really want to be appreciated. They want to be respected. They want to be needed, and they want to be listened to. I don't know if you have any that you want to add to that. I'll let you think about that a little bit. And then from the women's side, I feel that the women really need to feel secure and safe. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's financial. They have to trust the person that they're with, that they can feel secure in that relationship. They want to have fun. They want to feel beautiful. And they want to be with someone that's willing to grow with them and change.
And they also want to be listened to.
They also want to be listened to, but that's number 5 though. So, Yeah. So
Yeah,
any
well,
thoughts on that?
I do. I remember listening to something on the radio, and they it was a Christian-based radio, and they were talking about um, the characteristics of both genders before they did a sabbatical or retreat, and then the characteristics that they were looking for afterwards, and it shifted a lot. So it became more of those intrinsic things that each gender was not interested just in a relationship, but in their life too, and growth and purpose, sense of family were tops for women, and I think nowadays men are realizing growth and sense of purpose is very important for them. Men tended to be goal oriented in the past, and that's helpful, but the level of success isn't necessarily a great barometer. It's I think success is doing what you love and being good at it,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't
I
yeah, it doesn't have any particular monetary monetary stigma to it.
I agree with that, and I think society, I'm seeing a movement away from all the material stuff to just wanting to have that connection. And I'm going to go back to your earlier term, belonging. Really wanting to belong is really important. So I also wanted to ask you just your thoughts. We talked earlier about the manifestation and working with the angels that help us manifest things. And one of the things that's popping up here a lot, it kind of died down a little bit, but I'm seeing it more and more here in the Twin Cities, are vision boards. And one of the things I talked about in one of the talks I did in January was the angels were saying they were tired of the vision boards. They were saying they want them to be called action boards. Just stop dreaming about them, stop visioning about them, just get out and act on them. But what are your thoughts about vision boards or action boards or storyboards or the things that manifest?
I'm on the side of angels. Have never done any vision boards. I do vision thoughts. I constantly repeat thoughts in my head about something I want to bring forward, and then I let it go. And I try to follow a synchronistic flow, and I've found that if I'll focus on anything, it could just be like my vehicle that I have. I was focused on getting a white SUV for months, and then a friend of mine one day drove up with his father's white SUV, and I said, geez, I'd really like, I told myself, that's the kind of vehicle I'd like for my tour business. And then a few months later, he said he was selling it. And, I went over and I said, okay, what do you want for it? And I said, okay, I'll pay you. And he said, didn't you want to test drive it? I go, no. He said, you want to look at it? I go, no. This is what I've been envisioning. This is what I'm supposed to have. And what ended up happening, and I didn't even realize it, it was a Lincoln Navigator. And somebody had to tell me, a friend of mine had to tell me what a Lincoln Navigator was, because I didn't really care. And no, I just wanted a white SUV. So I didn't cut out a picture of anything. Obviously didn't have any vision board. What I did was I just used the power of my thought, and I kept emphasizing it. So it's almost like we're communicating with the universal realms, communicating really with the soul, and allowed a synchronistic flow of events to occur. And as those events occurred, I hooked into them. I embedded them in my energetic field. And so eventually, when I said, I'd like to have a vehicle like that, I ended up with that vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's been some experiments that when you visualize or where you replay that story again and again and again, the brain really doesn't differentiate between what is just a thought and what's true reality. And that's why some people have such a hard time watching vivid movies. The brain doesn't distinguish this is just a movie. Even if you sit there and tell yourself this is just a movie, this is just a movie, the brain really feels that as it is in existence, as it is in real life. And visualizing has that same impact in our life. So it's very, very powerful. So I would agree. I would agree more with action boards. And when the messages came through from the angels, I was actually channeling in a public place, and I started laughing because the messages were so strong and so very punctual. But they also delivered, and I remembered it as I was preparing for tonight, was that just to remember to get yourself to your highest frequency, because that's where you want to manifest someone to, is at your highest frequency. So as we were talking about being intimate with someone that was at a lower frequency, you don't want that. You want to be with a partner that's at the same or elevated frequency, so that you're not it's not constantly a struggle between raising one or the other's frequencies, or that level of love.
Absolutely. One of the things that is coming to mind now, so many people that don't have anybody in their life are, doing the vision board. They're trying to manifest. And I was walking the labyrinth over here in Sedona, and I've been struggling with, having anybody in my life because of the type of life I have right now. And so, this higher part of myself, spirit or soul essence, whatever it's coming from, it gave me a nice mantra. It says, I only want to be with someone who wants and desires to be with me as much as I them, who wants to share love and compassion, who wants to grow spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally. And if you go after those characteristics, and of course, you want to find them attractive in those ways too, all those, not just one or two ways. That gives you a greater opportunity to finding, let's say, this partner that will meet you 50%, 50-50 as opposed to 70-30. And you won't have to compromise as much of your authentic self when, somebody really wants to be with you as much as you them.
That's a valid point. And you think, well, why wouldn't you want to be with somebody that wants to be with you, that intensely, or that meets you?
The nature of our codependency is that we want to be with someone.
Yeah, at a sacrifice, and both of us see that in our clients. That willingness to sacrifice some part of you or some part of your life in order to just be in any relationship, and that's why that knowing your authentic self, or knowing who you are, that I am energy, is so critical, so that you can select a partner and you can draw in a partner that's of an equal match to you. And those are the relationships that sustain over time. They develop, they evolve, they grow, because you've done your internal work.
And maybe this is a good time to read this little blurb out of the Gene Keys book that we both study.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, it's concerned with, the key associated with the relationship. And, it's broken down into three qualities, the shadow aspect, the human gift, and then the divine nature of that particular thing. So in relationship, the divine nature aspect, the author describes it this way. He says, in a codependent relationship, both partners have sacrificed a part of their true selves for the relationship, and the result is a lack of synthesis, he feels, that drives the negative patterns of relationship. So they're sacrificing their authentic natures to be in the relationship, and this is what most relationships are like, and that's why it's codependent. And for a variety of reasons, including society's programming and ancestral family programming. Okay, so then he says, okay, I'm going back to this. In a relationship that's truly interdependent, both partners, they also sacrifice their sense of individuality into the higher vision of their divinity, holding nothing back for themselves at all. The true meaning of interdependence is about entering into a state of union with all beings in the cosmos, which involves the death of the separate self. And this kind of sacrifice can only occur when you give your heart unconditionally to another. And we know mothers, parents are really good at that. We know how easily we can do that with a pet. Think about how hard it is to do that with someone you barely know, a stranger, somebody you meet at a gas station, somebody you meet in the train station, on any public venue, just to be unconditional in how you relate to them and still holding your authentic self. And that takes away the need to judge. And so the primal dependency, codependency, and the projection is when you're holding back what you really need, who you really are, and then eventually there's resentment, and then the judgments come, and we see that with so many long-term relationships is the bickering, the criticisms, the judgments, and then the intimacy is gone, and the sense of wanting to be with each other is gone, and you're just existing with each other for the sake of the kids or whatever else is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that those statements are read. It's kind of where I find myself to be. It's like that's the only place I can go now, because if I don't go there, then any relationship I have will be harmful to me.
Right. Right. It's when you move into that higher level of consciousness, and both of us, like Matt Kahn, he talks, whatever arises, love that, or whoever steps in front of you, love them. There's no conditions to it. It is unconditional love, and that is tough to do on a consistent basis, and that's where we're all moving. I can't say that I can do that 100% of every day of the week.
None of us can. But
right, because the human element comes in. But it's when you have the tools that you can step back and you can recognize that you've just stepped away from that love, then you can quickly step back into it. And that's the key. It's not to judge yourself that you can't do it. It's to say, I did it again, but I know how to get back in line with my higher self.
Yeah, that's very, very significant and important. It doesn't matter if you slip up, if you just, slam somebody for being something that you think they shouldn't be or not agreeing with your opinion, but you catch yourself, and then you bring yourself back. And I think unconditional love, the phrase is hard to digest for so many of us. So, it could kind of transfer it into unconditionally accepting the way another person is. Mm-hmm. And then you don't have to worry about the love aspect, because it's easier, I think, if you just say, I unconditionally accept you, even if I think you're a schmuck.
No, wait a minute.
Well,
there was just a twisted judgment there in the end.
No, that's just the way that you have to deal with your mind. Is like because it's a valid point. Somebody could be a very belligerent boss, for example. And so you say, the person's a schmuck, but this is who they are. This is just who they are, and maybe this is their design of life. And so I say that kind of ironically, but it's to prove a point that you could accept the person even if they're that belligerent type of meathead, bonehead. And it's only because that's all they know. They don't know love. They don't know how to be caring or compassionate. So you just accept them for that.
Right. And it takes that pressure. It doesn't, that energy, their energy doesn't creep into your space. So it's allowing them to be who they are, and they will, no matter what you do, they will be who they are. Exactly. So it's releasing yourself from the grip of that, trying to change that person, or the frustration that you feel around that person. It's releasing that tension that you have. And
that's a very important key to having healthy relationships with anyone.
Right. So we have a few minutes left. Do we have time to talk about a few of the retrogrades that are coming up? We've got Mercury and Mars and Pluto that are all moving into a state of retrograde here.
Jupiter and Saturn.
Jupiter and Saturn. Wow. Let's just add a few more to that list.
Yeah, well, those two planets tend to dictate the economic conditions. So, potentially things will start, slow down and change. I mean, the thing with the Panama Papers is going to become I think it's going to snowball in the month of April, and you know what I'm talking about. And
that's the leak of unpaid taxes that have been
the tax dodgers all over the world. Yeah. And retrogrades, let's not even consider each individual planet. Mercury retrogrades always kicking my butt, but it's just slowing down for more of an introspective look at the characteristics that the planets represent and where they're at in your chart. And Mars is going to be going retrograde, and so it's kind of, that's that forceful will, ego drive. It's once again going to cause us to kind of reflect on maybe how far we've exalted our ego, how far we've extended our this the driving essence of survival, and pull back to say, oh, maybe I don't need to push so hard, for example. When there's like 4 or 5 retrogrades at the same time, you're going to feel like your wheels are spinning in a mud puddle, and it's only because the energies are just like allowing all of our souls just to say, we don't need to be progressing at such a rapid pace, for example, or this is the time in the cycle, where you want to reflect on the initiation, action, and repercussions of the action that you've recently experienced. And then it allows you to initiate in a better way the next time, as these planets move direct again, as more of the energies move and flow forward. Aries is kind of like the polar opposite of Pisces. It's very action-oriented. So we have the Aries energy right now. It's kind of pulling us away from what this deep recess of what we experienced in March. But at the same time, these retrogrades are going to temper that action-oriented energy to maybe bring it more internal. Okay, so we're not looking at buying something, building something, working out, changing the way our physical appearance is. We're thinking more along those lines of action as to what do I need to do to have more stability, a sense of stability and peace in my life, or what do I need to improve my physical well-being, or how I interact with people. If we're always moving in that forward action-oriented direction, we have a lot of collateral damage that we can create. So these retrogrades are just allowing us to reflect on all the things that have happened as in relation to our free will, and see how we can refine them the next go around. It can be a period of licking our wounds too.
I think it's coming on the heels of these intense March energies, which really shook us up. And so I feel that the intent is to go into that I am energy. It's to look at the opportunity of what did we learn, what do we want to shift and change, what do we want to take forward. But I know that many people are going to just pout or lick our wounds or not take this opportunity to really grow from it. And I look at retrogrades as really an opportunity of growing and evolving, because it is a somewhat rest period, a reflective period.
Yeah, and if you're pushing forward in a period with lots of retrograde planets, you're going to get very frustrated.
Yeah, it's not gonna go. It's just not gonna go.
So our advice would be, and I heard this from a celebrity once, put down your phones, get away from your computers, stop going to Facebook, pick up a book, read, and sit still.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I too, I've been hearing from the angels and ascended masters to step away. So I've been spending longer times away from the computer, and you and I both run businesses, so that's not always possible. You have to, check in on things, but it is to step away from the electronics and have that quiet downtime. So that's nice.
That'll help our nervous system as well, which is being constantly bombarded.
It is, with the electronics and the...
So let's kind of, want to finish this with the theme of the relationship. This having a period of slow movement, the retrogrades, and just coming off what we had going on in March. It's a great opportunity to really evaluate how we interact with people, how much of ourselves we present authentically and truthfully, how much of ourselves we not just sacrificing, but we're compromising, and seeing the areas that we could shift and change in the aspect of relating to anything and everyone. And of course, if you have that one-on-one direct intimate partner, it's almost like a great time for the parties to take a time out and to see where their needs are not being met, and to come together and have deeper discussions about how they're not being fulfilled, areas that they'd like to improve on with how they interact with each other. And of course, communicating is the key.
It is, and that's that growth. That's that being willing to grow, willing to move forward as partners. So, very nice. Very nice. Well, with that, I think it's time to wrap up for this episode of YourLifeCore Radio. And I want to thank you, Mark Giffon of Sedona Mystical Tours. It's always a pleasure to work with you. I've gotten a lot of great feedback on just us doing this show together, so it's been really fun. Tonight's topic was fun. Thank you for your perspective and your insight. And so with that, you're listening to YourLifeCore Radio. I'm Laurie Wonder with co-host Mark Giffon. And from the Archangels, Ascended Masters, and all their helpers, and from your co-host and I, we wish you this. May all dimensions of your energy, your physical, mental, emotional, etheric fields be opened, expanded, and be infused with a high vibration of the frequency of peace, love, happiness, joy, and abundance. May you call on the helpers of the universe to support and help you. And with those universal helpers, we send you beams of light and love from all of the universe. Good night.
Good night.